Hello dear chess friends, in this video I would like to show you sidelines and part of the analysis in one of the most fascinating openings in the theory of chess. One of the openings that has been heavily analyzed throughout the years, and people, I'm sure they put thousands of hours of analysis in order to get the final verdict, which is probably that with proper play from both sides the game should end up in a draw after 40 moves of forced moves, and by now people probably already forgot what was the reasoning behind the moves that could have been chosen as alternatives earlier on. So the opening I'm talking about is the Botvinnik variation of Slav defense. Again, one of the most heavily explored openings in chess. So let's take a look at those variations. So it starts with d4, then black goes d5, c4, c6, we have the Slav. Knight f3 or knight c3 doesn't really matter, and the game should transpose to same positions. Knight f6, knight c3, e6. Right now white has e3. This often leads to the Meron system of the Slav, but for Botvinnik variation we need to have bishop g5, the more aggressive move. On the other hand, it's not protecting the pawn on c4, and this is what black is trying to take advantage of. White plays e4 so that he has full central control. b5 protecting the pawn in the center on the c4 square, and white pushes e5. So as you can see, the knight is attacked on f6. It looks like he might actually be just losing a piece. It's not true though. Black goes h6. So if e takes f6, h takes g5, and black is not losing any material, it's just an exchange of minor pieces. Bishop h4 is the main move, and here black, in order not to lose material, should opt for g5. And the main move here is knight takes g5, but what I would like to show you right now is an alternative move which could surprise some of your opponents. Or if you're playing the Botvinnik variation, make sure you don't fall for the common traps that exist in this position. So e takes f6 requires black to capture the bishop on h4, and right now white plays knight e5. So the justification behind this move is that actually black spent so much time on playing with the pawns in the opening, in particular to protect his surplus pawn and not to lose the piece due to the pin, that he sort of forgot about the development of the minor pieces. So what white is trying to do right now is just an immediate attack on the black king. In particular, this f7 spot might turn out to be a problem. And I found a couple of interesting games which involved this position, and in one of those black made a horrible mistake right now, not realizing what the danger is. He played bishop b7, most likely thinking that there is nothing going on, there is nothing threatening, until white plays queen h5. But in chess, whenever tactics is concerned, one of the common tactical methods, tactical resources, is actually change of the move order of the move sequence you consider. So even though queen h5 followed by queen f7 or knight f7 could be a major threat, it's worth considering changing the move order. So what if white captures the pawn first? It looks like it shouldn't really be a problem, right? Because you're not likely to be checkmated with, well, actually your opponent having no pieces developed. Let's take a look at that. So black didn't take on f7. He probably realized that this is just completely lost. Instead, he captured the pawn, which we're going to see in a moment. Instead, he took, if he took on f7, queen h5 comes with great force. And neither of the options that black has currently king f6 or king g8 is satisfactory. So after king g8, which is of course the easiest, white just goes queen g6, and after bishop g7, which is the only move, white just gives checkmate. So that's pretty straightforward. If instead king takes f6, then the white has this very simple yet effective resource at his disposal. Queen captures h4 with a skewer. The black king will of course escape, but when that happens, white can simply collect the queen and most likely win the game due to great material advantage. So capturing the knight is, well, pretty much impossible. In the game there was queen takes f6, but after knight takes h8, queen takes h8, queen h5, black simply realized it's probably not going to be fun to play this position anymore, and well, he simply resigned. This was actually played between Emmerich and Ballester. The white player approximately 2200, white 2100. So we're not talking about amateur chess. This is actually expert level. So 2200 means that white was basically national master level, black candidate master level. So people with titles actually or at this level make mistakes like that. Another game that I found in my database, so after the research, continued with queen takes f6. Sorry, not in this position, of course. We cannot cheat like that. Black has to choose from either bishop b7 or queen captures f6. So in this position, queen takes f6 was played in a couple of games, and here I would like to show you two very interesting ones. One started with bishop e2. So white already has a very clear plan of putting the bishop on h5 so that the pawn on f7 is under attack. And it turns out that despite the material deficit, white's attack is really, really dangerous. After bishop e2, black went c5, probably just trying to pretend that the pressure in the center is much more important than than the threat of bishop h5, and after bishop e2, and here the game saw bishop d6. So what black is trying to do is to get rid of this very active knight on e5 simply by capturing it, and white plays knight e4, a very strong move, hitting both the queen and the bishop, and this virtually forced black to go bishop b4. If instead queen e7, then I believe white can just go bishop h5, and these three pieces are exceptionally strong. If bishop takes e5, then pawn takes back, and in a moment either knight d6 or knight f6, black is not going to survive this attack. I'm not going to be afraid of saying this. It's really a difficult position, if not objectively lost. So after knight e4, black played bishop b4, king f1, and even though white is not going to castle in this game, it's not that relevant. What matters the most, what actually is the only factor that matters, is white's activity of the minor pieces. So here black played queen e7, which was met with a3, kicking the bishop back. If bishop d6, then I believe once more bishop h5. Black went bishop a5 and bishop h5. Currently black has a huge problem. Either knight takes f7 or maybe even bishop takes f7 is going to be the threat. If black goes rook h7 in order to protect this pawn, then I believe that after queen g4, threatening queen to g8, black's position is just going to be completely lost. Even a move like queen f3, exerting even more pressure on f7 and also preparing a knight jumping to f6 could be a very interesting idea. So this isn't the game continuation. In the game, Black just castled kingside, but this turned out to be the beginning of the end, because after queen g4 check, king h7, white simply captured on f7, and now it turns out that with all of these pieces involved in the attack, black is just going to lose in a moment, so the critical continuation would go rook f7. Now we don't take on f7, instead we just play queen g6 check, king h8, and now knight takes f7. It's quite picturesque to see all of these pieces completely not involved in the game, just staying on their initial positions or on a5, which is again an offside position for the bishop. So this was Pettersson against Isler. This is how black got crushed. And in another game, starting from this position, instead of so after queen f6, instead of bishop e2, white also tried playing a4. An interesting idea, quite a standard one, I would say, just trying to challenge these pawns so that once one of those moves, the other becomes weak. Quite understandable. So after a4, black played bishop b4, and again bishop e2, same threat. Is worth remembering this idea. And this time after bishop e2, black played c5, most likely hoping for a central counterattack. After all, if c takes d4 is going to take place on the board, then perhaps white is also going to have some tactical difficulties. On the other hand, at this very moment, the queen protects the pawn on d4 sufficiently, so it's not really a big problem for white. After c5, white castled, which was met with c takes d4, queen takes d4, and knight d7. And this is probably the tactical idea black had in mind. It's also probably setting a bit of a trap, because if white played f4 in order to safeguard the knight on e5 and anticipating knight takes e5, when that happens, then the pawn would take. So knight takes, pawn takes, with quite an optimistic position. However, right now there is bishop c5, and it turns out that due to the pin, it is actually white who's going to lose the material. So f4 would not work, and instead, after knight d7, white just played queen e4, and after rook b8, there was knight takes d7, bishop takes d7, and I'm curious if you're able to find this idea which was played on the board. If you need some time, feel free to pause the video and use it as a training position. Even though it looks like white's attack pretty much evaporated, there is still one very nice idea, which is good to remember. Knight to d5, forking the queen and the bishop. It turns out that playing queen to e7 is impossible because, of course, of the knight. And if black captures on b2, this doesn't really bring him any relief, because at the very least white can play rook a to b1 or rook f to b1, and at the end of the day he's going to collect the bishop on b4. So this is losing, and it's not really forcing all the way from the very beginning, but the last sequence of moves was actually very logical. So white was trying to make the threat of playing bishop h5. Earlier on he challenged the pawn structure, black parried that. White played bishop e2 to play bishop h5, black tried to get some sort of a counterplay in the center. White castled to hide the king, and now knight e4 might be the threat, knight b5 is also the threat, so black needs to do something. In order to meet all of those ideas, he took on d4 with the pawn, queen captured, renewing the threats of knight b5 and knight e4, so black tried to react with a counter threat, hitting the knight and pinning, hitting the knight which is currently pinned by the queen. In order to meet that, white had to react with his own counter threat. So as you see, this is a very heavy tactical line, the opening itself, and it's rich in combinations pretty much from the very beginning. Not maybe from move 1, but starting on move 7 or 8, where pieces get actually exchanged in some sort of a crazy fashion. This is very entertaining. And later on, this was actually quite forcing. So if black is not aware of these ideas, he might find himself in great danger. So if you're playing Botvinnik variation with either of the colors, I think it's quite good to understand those ideas, and they might occur once or twice in your games. And the common tactical patterns in the openings you play it's generally recommended to know them. So I hope you're going to be able to use those ideas, and preferably you're not going to blunder like black did in those games I've shown you.